Okay, when you start taking off the OCVs, okay, there's 3 bolts down here, and they're all 3 number 8s, okay, 8 millimeters. When you take these off, I use, I use a little breaker bar, or you can use your torque wrench. I use a little torque wrench on it, but something small because they're just an 8, okay. Then break them loose, and then go ahead and take, I use a little spinners, one of these little spinners to go ahead and take them all the way out, get them all loosened up, and then I take them out the rest of the way by hand. And these usually don't have to be rebuilt. They're pretty solid. And those bolts are long, but they will come out. They have enough room. You might want to get that back one before you get the front one. The front one's the easiest one to work on. One of these are kind of handy to use. They do have a little washer on them, so don't lose that washer. Okay, you can just work it off just like that. They'll usually have just a little bit of oil in them. So if you have a, if you have a rag or something, there's a little O-ring here. You see that? Okay, and there's a couple of more O-rings in here that you might want to get a kit for if they didn't come in your kit. So I'll go ahead and get that other one off, and then I will be right back. Okay, so the OCVs are off. Okay, so now you can see your timing chain completely. All right, and that way we can go ahead and find our timing marks. Now is the spoiler alert. You need to get your timing chain into position now, okay? And you can't mess around with this, so you need to make sure you do it exactly right, okay? And I think I've got a diagram over here for it. Yeah, here's the timing chain diagram. Your timing marks. Timing mark on the bottom, okay? You have got to get those timing marks exact, okay? Before you go any further, that needs to be done. Okay, okay, so when you're rotating your crank, never go counterclockwise on it, okay? Always go clockwise. A lot of people, they do that by mistake, and it just ruins their engine because you can get some slack in these chains, and then it'll jump. So you may have to turn this several revolutions to get these to line up, because these cams, they're dual overhead cams, it's not one round and then they line up. It could be 6 or 8 rounds, or you could get lucky and it could be 1 round. But what you've got to look for is right here, there's your little dot lined up, and if you look, it goes right over the top of the cam, right here, of that overhead cam. See that? It's going to line up with that. Same thing on this side. There's the dot. It's going to line up with the cam. Okay? And down here on the bottom, right there, that's going to line right up with that slot right there. You'll see the dot and the slot right there together. You know you got it. It's probably at a 4 o'clock on the, as you're looking at that dot. Okay, so that's what you got to do. You got to get all 3 of these lined up exactly where you need them before you want to start breaking down those chains. Okay, and we're going to have to take the timing chain off, of course, so that we can get to the others, and then we're going to keep rolling on this, and I will be back and I'll give you some more instructions. Okay, So before we put the tension, before we take the tension off of the timing chain, you're going to have to secure these cams. Okay, now you can do that in a couple of different ways. Now I use the actual tool for it. Okay, and that's the tool I use. It's made for this Mazda. It's made for 3.5, 3.7 Ford V6 or Mazda engine, same thing. Okay, I use that. Some guys use a couple of crescent wrenches or a couple of regular wrenches. Okay, I use the actual tool. I put it on both sides. That locks your cams into place, so you have no chance of getting those cams out of time, because if you do, you're going to ruin your engine. Okay, so just make sure you lock them down. They'll fit perfect. They're machined to do that. If you want to use the crescent wrenches or box end wrenches or open end wrenches, that's up to you, but I use the actual tool. I think I bought it off Amazon for $30-something. It's worth it. So you put those in place, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to back off this bottom sprocket right here. I'm going to back this off to the 9 o'clock. So I'm going to move that notch right here, and I'm going to back that notch back to 9 o'clock. That's going to put the slack I need into the chain, and that way I can compress the tensioner, and then I can go ahead and unbolt the tensioner. You need to take the tensioner off first, and I'll show you the schematic on the order in which you need to take these off. So I'll do that right now. Okay, here's the diagram with the order to take things off. 1 being your tensioner, 2, you go ahead and pull the chain, 3, go ahead and take the side guide off, 4, take the other side off, and then 5th, you take the sprocket off. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then before you do that, here's a look at the one where you turn back the bottom sprocket to the 9 o'clock. So you're taking this spot from here, which it's a little bit closer to 11 o'clock, but you're taking it to 9 o'clock. Okay, so that's what you do to create the slack in your chain so that you can compress your tensioner. Alright, there's the tensioner, and it's out, and those are 2 8mm bolts. Almost everything on the inside of that, including all your bolts for the water pump and everything. I think almost all of them are 8mm, but I'll tell you if they're not. If you don't have one of these little spinning deals, it's like a miniature ratchet. I highly recommend you get that set. You can buy it at Harbor Freight for $6 or whatever. It gives you all 3 of the different sizes. You better get one of those because you're going to need it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a press, and I'm going to press this in, and then I'm going to go put the pin in here. That way it's ready to go back in. Now, if you need to replace that, it doesn't go back right or it doesn't extend right, then you need to go order one online or go to your Mazda dealer and get a replacement. But I'm pretty sure this one's okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set it up in the press and put the pin in. Okay, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you I'm doing my best to show you how to compress this. Okay, now you've got a little lever here. Okay, and you can see that little lever on top. Now, when you hold that lever back, you can compress that. Okay, and you can by hand. It's got a little lever lock, so as it comes back out and tightens up, it locks itself in. Okay, the only way it's going to ever go back is if you pull this lever down. See, like that. See that? Okay, then I just make I make this out of a clothes hanger, and I just go ahead and put it right in like that. Okay, that way it's ready to go. Once you put it back in, it'll shoot itself back out, then it'll lock in. Okay, if you don't think the tension is enough on this, then you need to go ahead and order you another one. But that's how you go about compressing that. Sometimes you have to put them in a vise, sometimes you don't. This one doesn't need to be in a vise. It's fairly easy. Just like that. There you have it. Ready to go back in. Okay, tensioner's off, which completely loosened up the chain. Okay, so now you can just go ahead with in the reverse order, which you want to go ahead and take the chain off right here. That's the next step. Just go ahead and take that loose. Okay, that gives you a lot of play in the system, and you can go ahead and just work that chain off all the way around. Okay, take it down and just pull it out. Okay, so there's the chain. 175,000 mile chain. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the other components off. I was looking at that tensioner. I think I'm going to have to order another one. So anyway, we're going to replace these guides. This guide here, which is a swing guide, okay, this just comes right off just like that. It doesn't bolt on or anything. That's the swing guide where your tensioner fit, and it fits just like that. Okay, then you've got this guide over on the other side right here, which is a bolt on, and you got a guide over here which is bolt on, and then over here this is looks like the swing guide, but it's not. It's bolted. Okay, so and then the sprocket down on the bottom will just pull right off. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get these all off, and we'll be back. Now, I highly recommend once you get these pieces out that you immediately do a check from your old pieces to your new pieces and make sure you got the right pieces. Do that right away. That way, if you've got to go back and get something different, you've got time before you get back into the rebuild process. So first thing I do is I checked my chain against the new chain. It was good. I'm checking the sprocket. I'm going to check each individual piece. They may look a little different based on the, you know, how they were made, but they still should be the same size and fit and bolt up the same. So make sure you do that right away so you know if you have any problems. Okay, all of the screws are 8mm. All of them are the same but one, and it's on the right hand larger slide. This one here. This is a long screw that goes in there, so don't forget that. Okay, and the upper left hand slide will not come out. The bolt won't come out on this one until you go ahead and take off the cam and change the cam chain. This one right here, that bolt will hit these teeth right here, so you can't take it off till this comes off. So we got to go ahead and you got to get this off, and we're going to change this tensioner out anyway, and this belt or this chain. So we're going to take this off, and then we'll slide that out, get that one off, replace it, and don't forget to put it back on. I'll remind you as we go along. Got the cam bolts out. They're T55. Okay, they're a Thorax T55. You've got two on each one of the cams. This is the bolt right here. T55. Okay, you got to have it. You're going to need a breaker bar, a large breaker bar for the top one. The smaller one, you can probably use a regular breaker bar, but you may need a breaker bar for both of them. The smaller one has a pretty good sized flat washer on it, and I'll show it to you in a minute. And the large one just has the regular bolt without, there's nothing on it. There's no washer or anything on it. Okay, so you have to get those both out, and then what you want to do is you want to pull these out as a unit. Okay, and you should just be able to you may have to do just a little prying, but if you do it easy. Okay, this one's ready to come out. This back one's a little bit harder. Okay. Let me get just a little small pry bar for that. And you don't want to mess that up at all. Okay, those need to come out together, and I'll show you why in a minute. Okay. Get this one off. Okay, there's that one. You can see the timing points on that. Of course, it's keyed, so it has to go back on the right way. This shouldn't be this difficult. There it is. It was just a little bit trapped. Okay, and you see that's keyed as well. Okay, so I got both of those out now, and I can go ahead and take the tensioner off. I've got new tensioners for this, for both sides. I'm going to go ahead and take these off. They're two number 8s, and the tensioner's already pinned. So I'm going to go ahead and get these laid out over there with the old tensioner, both sides. And then you can go ahead and take this bolt off as well, the one that wouldn't come out for that one guide. And don't forget to go ahead and put that other guide back in. Otherwise, I do it right away so I don't worry about it. And I just don't torque it all the way down. So that's how you get that, the first cam chain off. And I'll lay everything out for you in just a second and show you how it came off, what it looks like. And then I'll be right back. Okay. Here they are out as if you were facing the engine. There's your timing mark right there. And these slots actually line up on the back. That slot and this slot, they kind of match up like that onto the cams. Okay, so that's what it looks like. The smaller one has this larger donut on it. That's what holds it in. The big one just has a regular bolt, just like that. And it just folds in like that. They're T55s, 2 number 8 millimeters holding on the tensioner. Okay, they're the same size. And when you put these back in, these bolts are stretch bolts, so you have to have new ones. You don't have to, but I highly recommend it that you go ahead and go to the Mazda. The only place you can get them is a Mazda dealer, and then they're $7 or $8 a piece. Go ahead and buy them. Buy 4 of them. You're going to need 2 for one side and 2 for the other side. But go ahead and get them, and go ahead and get a new crank bolt as well. You don't need the washers, but make sure you get the bolts. Okay, so I only do one side at a time, so I'm going to go ahead and prepare this side to reinstall, and then I'm going to be back. Thanks. Okay, I'm back. While I was going through all of my parts for my timing replacement parts, I found an issue, and I'm going to go ahead and let you understand. I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it so you can understand. So when I bought these parts, I bought them in a kit, and the new kit came with what I found out was actually an upgraded slide. Okay, this is on the left-hand side. It goes in, it mounts like this right here on the left-hand side as you're looking at the engine. And this is that one bolt that was kind of covered by the cam bearing, and we had to wait to pull this off. Well, anyway, you can see these are quite a bit different. You can see those pieces are quite a bit different. This is the upgraded piece, and I guess they upgraded it for a reason. Well, what they didn't say is that these stock bolts don't work for this, because see how thick this is? Now it'll work for this one fine, but it won't work for this one. Too short. So I had to go back over, actually went to Ford, and I talked to the Ford parts guy, and at first they couldn't find the number, but there is a change number, and it is a larger bolt than this, and there's actually a shorter bolt for the other one. So anyway, note that if you see anything other than this piece, you'll probably get this new upgraded piece, and if you get it, you got to have the new bolts. So make sure you talk it over with the parts guy there at the Mazda or the Ford place and say, hey, I need that bolt set. Okay, so that's why you always check all of your parts first before you start your putting everything back together, because that way if you catch it, you have plenty of time to go and get the right bolts or change out a part if it's wrong. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do, because I'm actually waiting on a couple parts, is I'm going to go ahead and break down the water pump, because I've got to do that before I reassemble anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and move the camera over and show you what to do for the water pump. Okay, before you start taking these bolts out, again, these are all 8 millimeters. Before you start taking those bolts out around that water pump, go find you, a plastic bag or whatever. I use a garbage bag, and cover up that opening for your oil pan, because when you crack this open, there's going to be some residual water left over, and you don't want that going down in your oil pan. Even though I'm going to do a real thorough cleaning on the oil pan, you just really don't want that stuff going in there. So go ahead and put something in there. I got some stuff underneath this, to block it off, some rags, and then I put this over the top of it. That way when I crack it open, hopefully I'll keep that from running down in there. But we're still going to flush it out anyway before we fill it back up. So might save yourself a little headache if you do that. Okay, so you can see I've got everything prepared for the new water pump. What you should do, even though it's got rubber seals, what I do is I take a new razor blade and I go around and I just scrape that down and make sure I've got everything nice and smooth for the new, not only for the new gaskets but for the new water pump itself. So I do that, then I just take a shop towel and I clean everything off, make sure it's nice and dry, and then I'll go ahead and set the new water pump in. Okay, here's a drawing for putting your water pump back in. Gives you the numbers on which bolts to put in first. Basically, you're going from the top center outwards. The torque spec is 76 to 101. I usually end up right around 90 on this. And I do recommend, now that we're starting to put everything back into the engine now, I do recommend at least a blue Loctite. I wouldn't go with a red, but minimum I'd recommend a blue. I wouldn't want to, put all these things back in and have something loosen up on me. So go spend the $5 or $6 to get you a tube of blue and apply that to all your bolts and nuts so you don't have anything come loose. So I'm going to go ahead and get the new water pump positioned, and we'll go from there. Okay, the new water pump is installed. It's torqued down. Again, I ended up at about 92 inch-pounds on that. 8 bolts, make sure you count them up. Make sure you use your thread lock. Now I'm going to go ahead and torque down the cam chain tensioners right here. Same thing here. I start at about 80 and then I'll end up at about 92 to 95. So there's one on the back bank, one here on the front bank, and again they're all 8 millimeters. And I've got this in, and I went ahead and put this on so I make sure I had it right, and then I'll show you the assembly on the other side so you can see how I did that. Here's the right bolts for that new guide for the new timing chain. You can see it's about almost twice as long as the original, and it has to be that long so it can go through this piece of plastic. So that's the bolt I was waiting for, so now I'm going to go ahead and put that in and torque it down. Again, that's 79 to 101 inch-pounds. I'll probably end up right around into the 90s on that, so I'm going to go ahead and get that in because that's got to go in before I put these cams back on and the cam bearings. Okay, I've got the overhead cam gears ready and the chains are on. Here's the schematic for it. Basically, you're lining up the new chain. Mine have a little silver one on these marks, on the chain marks. Some of them have yellow, some of them have red. This is what mine has, and they line up with the notches. So if you see, there's my gear notch matched up, both of them. Same thing here. Okay, so those are ready to go back in, and then I'll give you the torque specs on those real quick. Okay, the left side timing chain guide is on. 2 bolts. This is the new bolt that was twice as long. I went ahead and torqued up the tensioners on both sides and got them ready. I went ahead and installed the new chain on this cam already. I haven't torqued anything down yet. I want to get everything in place first and then double check it on my schematic and make sure I've got it right. But it's all fitting back together good. You can see there's there's my point, so it's right lined up where it should be. I've still got the blocks in right now, the holding blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and get that other side on, and then we'll be ready to put the main chain back on. Okay, so I've got the cam chains all back on, and I've got everything prepared. If you look right here, you'll see right there is the mark on the new chain right there. Now these two marks should coincide with the slot on the other side if you look at it from the other side. Okay, so make sure that those line up, they're in the right spot, and that you've torqued down your tensioner already, because you're not going to be able to get back in there again. I haven't pulled any pins yet, but it looks pretty good. Also, your two smaller size cams, they have the big washers on them right here. That has the big thick washer, and then it just has a regular 55 in there, but don't forget your washers. You can't put it back on without the washer anyway. Okay, so there's my timing points right there. My other one right there. And then if you look across, the little chains match up with those timing points. Okay, so if you look on the other side, you'll see that the gold little link is right across from each one of them. That tells you that you've got the chains in the right position and that they're set up right. Okay, so now I'm ready to go ahead and put the right guide on, which goes underneath here, and then we'll start reassembling the tensioners. Okay, here's a good sheet with all of your torques on it and a description of everything that we're getting ready to do now. So I'll just run that by so you can see those. Okay, this right-hand guide is in 76 to 101 inch-pounds on that. Same thing. All of these, I haven't found any of these smaller 8mm bolts there that weren't, so far, that weren't in 76 to 101 inch-pounds. So that's in, the other one's in. Now I'm going to go ahead and start getting the others ready and then get the chain ready. Okay. New bottom sprocket going in. Don't forget, we went to 9 o'clock when we started taking care of the top cams. So now we're going to put this back on, this new one on, and then we're going to turn it back up to 11 o'clock, which is top dead center for piston 1. So do not forget to do that before you put that main chain back on. Okay? The order to put it back on is the sprocket. Okay? Then you come up, hit in here into the water pump, then you come around the two mains and end up with the tensioner. We started with the tensioner last time, we're going to end with the tensioner this time. Okay, so that's the look at the order you want to put it back together again in. Don't forget to go from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock on that bottom sprocket. Okay, the right main guide is installed. 2 bolts. The bottom bolt is the very long bolt, several inches, 5-6 inches long. The top bolt is a standard bolt. They're both 8mm. They both torque down to 76 to 101 inch-pounds. So that's installed. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the main one on the left side, and then we'll be ready for the chain and the tensioner. Okay, this is the final check. I've got everything installed, all the chains are installed, all the notches are lined up here on the back of the cams, down here, right there. Everything is notched up and everything is tight and torqued. So I am going to go ahead and turn the engine over by hand. I'm going to put I've got a socket down there on the bottom. Now I'm going to go ahead and crank it at least 2 or 3 times, and just make sure that nothing is, if you feel any kind of resistance at all, just stop. It should just, I mean, it's never easy, but it should go ahead and crank over. You'll be able to tell each power stroke. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and make sure everything is working right. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the OCVs back in. Make sure you check the O-rings. There's several O-rings on the OCVs. There's one here, there's about 3 here. Just make sure they're in good condition. Don't put them back in if you know that they're shredded or there's something wrong with them. Okay, just make sure you check them out. All right, again, these are 76 to 101 inch-pounds. There's 3 long bolts. Let me see, I'll show you a bolt here. These are the bolts for them. Okay, you got 3 for each, and this is what goes up into the cam right here. And just take your time, make sure that these have like edges on them, so you'll be able to lock them in pretty easy. So don't force it, and just take your time, put them in, then torque them down, and then I'll be back. Okay, OCVs are back in place. 3 bolts each, all torqued down to spec, 76 to 101 inch-pounds. They should finish up just like that. Now I've pretty much got everything installed as far as this goes, so I'm going to go ahead and start getting the timing chain cover prepared, cleaned up, and then I'll talk about how to seal that up. Okay, I've got my timing chain cover all prepared. I basically just take a razor blade. I take a new set of razor blades, and I just use a razor blade and go over everything with a razor blade. And then I take some real fine emery cloth, and I just hit it a little bit with some emery cloth. And I do the same thing on the engine itself. Just take your time and make sure you get those surfaces nice and smooth. Make sure there's no leftover old sealer or anything on there. Make sure they're nice and dry so that your compound's going to stick really well. Okay, so I've got that all prepared. Don't forget to knock out the old seal and put in a new seal. And I just use a really simple Harbor Freight, it's just one of those tools that you buy at Harbor Freight. Knock that out just like that, and then make sure you put a new seal in there, because you don't want to go through all this work and then and then have this seal go bad on you. Okay, now some people put the seal right back in and then they just work it over the crankshaft. I don't do that. I put the timing chain cover on, and then I use the other tool I've got to press this back in from the outside. Okay, now I've heard it both ways, but I do believe that the way to do it is to put the timing cover on first and then put this in last, and then you just start it by hand and then force it on in with a tool. Okay, you can use a large socket, just a large deep well socket will do it just fine, as long as you get it started square. Okay, so I've got this all ready to go now. I've got my surface on the engine ready to go. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply my gasket maker onto the engine. I don't apply it to this cover. Okay, I leave the cover alone, because you're going to have to get that cover and you're going to have to put it in there. And usually you're going to be sliding the cover up and down on the sides of the framing and everything to get the engine prepared. So I do the engine part, and then once I get this in there and get it fairly close in place, then I go ahead and I inspect the engine areas where I've applied that maker to make sure I've got it all covered and none of it's been wiped off. Okay, and I'll usually hit these real nice and thin on this one, just a nice thin coat to match up with what I've already got, but I don't put a lot on this one, because by the time you get it in place and get it moved around, you're going to knock some off of it. So put your gasket sealer on the engine itself and not on the cover. Okay, so I've got everything pretty much prepared, so I'm going to go ahead and get my surface ready. The surface is already ready, but I'm going to go ahead and actually get my gasket maker in place on the engine, and then I'm going to go ahead and put this on. So before I start that, I'm going to show you, this is the way you start this cover back on, and you see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Okay, 7, 8, and 9 being that the bracket for the engine mount. Okay, so you're starting like the second bolt hole underneath the heads on both sides, 1 and 2. Then you're going to the bottom, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the 2 very top ones. Those 5 and 6 are the longer screws, so don't forget that. And then 7, 8, and 9 is that bracket that holds on your engine mount. Okay, now the sequencing to this, you've got about 10 minutes once you start this process to get these snugged in, so before that gasket maker starts hardening up. So 1 through 6 is 89 inch-pounds, then 7 through 9, which is the 3 larger ones here, they're 11 foot-pounds. Then you go back again and hit the 1 through 6 at 15 to 20 foot-pounds, and then 7 to 9 again at 63.6 foot-pounds, that's on there pretty good. Okay, so that's the tightening of those, and then you'll go ahead and start putting the others in, and here's the rotation on them. It's all numbered. Okay, so you're looking 1, 2 across, 3, 4 in the center, then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So that's the way they recommend it. You know, it's up to you. I go fairly close to that, but you can see that they're working from the middle outward, and that's the key. But the first ones that you start with, these are very important that you do. These 2, the 3 and 4 on the bottom, 5 and 6 on top, those are critical to getting this thing right. Okay, so make sure you do that, and make sure you get it on there as quick as you can. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get everything ready, and I'm going to put it in there.